How you guys doing? It's the end of day 3. What day is it? Day 3? Oh my gosh. It's like we got sucked into a time machine, but like a good one, you know? It's been really fun, you guys, getting to know you over the course of these last couple of days. And I'm really excited to be here and to share with you tonight on essentially the human identity. This talk is called, Who Are We, God? Who are we, God? What is a human being? This is simultaneously one of the most fundamental questions we can ask. And at the same time, in the world we live in, this is one of the most controversial questions we can ask. We're going to look at 2 views tonight. And like we've been doing throughout this week here at the ReFresh conference, I want to highlight, I want to compare, and I want to contrast the way that one of these views can absolutely devastate our lives and the way that the other one of these views can actually heal and restore our lives, right, if we let it. So one view says that human beings are made in the image of God, and that because we are made by God, God decides who we are. It almost reflects this title, right? Who are we, God? The other view says that a human being is an accidental byproduct of natural selection. In this view, there is no God, and the physical world is the only thing that exists. Because there's no overriding purpose, human beings define for themselves what a human being is. In other words, human beings are self-defined. I'm going to start by looking at this second view, the idea that human beings are self-defined. Because I would argue that whatever most of us or some of us in society claim about the way we live, most of us actually buy into the viewpoint that humanity is self-defined. Tom Price, one of my lecturers at the Oxford Center for Christian Apologetics and now a colleague with RZIM, once said that we are all under the influence of books we've never read. We're all under the influence of books that we've never read. I thought that was such a good nugget. Many of those books were written by a man by the name of Friedrich Nietzsche. And I don't have the clicker, but I do have a picture of Friedrich Nietzsche. You'll recognize him from the incredible mustache. I don't agree with hardly any of his ideas, but this man had a mustache, let me tell you. Nietzsche is the one who famously wrote the words, "God is dead." Anyone familiar with that writing? God is dead. Raise your hand if you've heard that phrase before. Sometimes that phrase is misunderstood. It's true that Nietzsche didn't think God existed, but Nietzsche wasn't necessarily happy about the idea that God was dead. Nietzsche just viewed himself as the only person who was courageous enough to look right into the face of what a world without God would actually look like. It was sort of like a God is dead, and I'm the only person with the guts to call it like it is. The news that God is dead is at once a terrifying conclusion for Nietzsche, and at the same time, it's a liberating idea for Nietzsche. It brings freedom. Friedrich Nietzsche uses the metaphor of the ocean. He writes this, "Indeed, at hearing the news that the old God is dead, we philosophers and free spirits feel illuminated by a new dawn. Our heart overflows with gratitude, amazement, forebodings, expectation, and finally the horizon seems clear again, even if not bright. Finally, our ships may set out again, set out to face any danger. Every daring for the lover of knowledge is allowed again. The sea, our sea, lies open again. Maybe there has never been such an open sea." Nietzsche's almost reveling in the idea of freedom that the news that God is dead might bring. There's foreboding because Nietzsche, again, wants to look right into the face of the implications of a world without God. He doesn't want to flinch. He doesn't want to sugarcoat it. He wants to tell it like he sees it. So in the absence of God, where and what is the purpose of human beings? What does it mean to be a human being? And in this, Nietzsche's writings actually provide a very valuable mirror into what a world without God actually entails for a human being. In his book, Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche writes that concepts like good and evil actually don't mean anything in a world apart from God. Good and evil instead are actually just terms that weak people have used to subdue and clamp down on strong people, right? They're just terms. They're just socially constructed ideas, right? And so what is the purpose of human beings if it's not to fight for the good, because that concept doesn't really exist? Nietzsche believes that the only thing we have left is to look within ourselves and discover our inner desires, our inner will, whatever that may be, disregard every external factor, and we just live out our inner sense of selves. He writes, "This world is the will to power and nothing besides. And you yourselves are also the will to power and nothing besides. No external force has the right to exert itself upon you," says Nietzsche. "A human being is someone who looks within and finds the willpower to achieve what they want, and they go out and they do it. You are your inner will. You are your dreams, your desires. What makes you human at the core of reality is your own ability to find your dreams and make them real. In other words, we define ourselves." Now, we're all under the influence of books we've never read. Can you guys see where this germ of an idea is absolutely prevalent in our culture today? Can you see it? Who are our heroes right now? Who are the people that we celebrate? All of our stories, in fact, Alicia was talking about Disney, right? I'm a Disney fan too. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, right? Because we could basically take every Disney character and we could show someone who, despite external barriers, looks within themselves to find their beautiful dream. And they live that out, right? Overcoming the obstacles that are clamping them down, be that in the form of a wicked stepmother or a king of the ocean with a trident or a mean scuba diver who stole their son. Disney makes good stories, right? And I don't mean to reduce them all to that, right? But in our culture right now, there is that sense of you do you, follow your dream. No one has the right to tell you what you should or shouldn't be. No one has the right to restrict your freedom in any way. We live in a world which increasingly views any and all boundaries, restrictions, or limitations on our desires as evil. And so, as Christians, what are we doing? It's not just that we're weird. It's not just that, like, wow, you're really repressed, and that's pretty strange of you, and I'm, like, uncomfortable, but it's kind of whatever. It's actually that, hey, Christian, what you're doing is evil. You're repressing your own desires, and you're teaching other people to do the same. In this worldview, you're actually robbing them of what it means to be human. At first, this view of human beings sounds like freedom. It sounds liberating, right? We can almost get on board with Nietzsche's idea of a ship. We have the wide open ocean before us. Just go wherever your dreams tell you to go, right? Just get in that ship, hoist a sail, weigh anchor, and go. Follow your inner star. We all, I would argue, believe this to some extent in our culture. The truth is that individual freedom is a very good thing, okay? I'm not against freedom up here. But self-definition is something else entirely. So what are the consequences of a world without God? What are the consequences of a world where people only look within themselves for self-definition? The first consequence that I see is confusion. In a world where we only define ourselves, it raises significant questions, as we've been addressing today, about what it means to be a human being, and how that impacts questions like race and gender. Many people will be familiar with Caitlyn Jenner, formerly Bruce Jenner, a decorated Olympic athlete. In June of 2015, Jenner appeared on the cover of Vanity Fair magazine under an article entitled, "Call Me Caitlyn." In July, Caitlyn won an Excellence in Sports Performance Yearly Award, or an ESPY Award. This was a very significant cultural moment, as it marked one of the first times someone who had undergone a gender transformation had been so publicly celebrated. Glamour magazine named Jenner one of its 2015 Women of the Year. Barbara Walters named Jenner the most fascinating person of 2015, saying Jenner's celebrity has helped launch a national discussion about transgender rights. she has become a champion for the transgender community, raising awareness and advocating for acceptance. That's what Barbara Walters said. And overall, almost every celebrity voice out there basically praised Caitlyn Jenner. What many people don't remember is that same month, there was a woman named Rachel Dolezal who had been the subject of massive controversy. Dolezal had been a leader of an NAACP chapter, a group of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People in Spokane, Washington. And she was an instructor in Africana Studies at Eastern Washington University. But that same month, Dolezal was eventually forced to resign from both of those positions when her parents released a video saying, "Our daughter isn't actually black. She's white. In fact, she's very white. She was born in Montana." And just for illustrative purposes, I actually have a picture of Rachel Dolezal. So you can see somewhat of a difference there. One news article summed it up like this. After the notoriety that followed the June 2015 disclosure by her parents, Dolezal resigned as Spokane NAACP president, was kicked off a police oversight commission, lost a position as a freelance columnist for a weekly newspaper in Spokane, and was fired from her job teaching African studies at a nearby Eastern Washington University. It's interesting. It's interesting, isn't it? Just to compare these two case studies. On one hand, someone celebrated for transitioning, for following their inner sense of self, right? Celebrated and applauded. But actually, on the other hand, someone else is ridiculed, mocked, loses their job, loses their livelihood for seemingly trying to do the same thing. Transcend maybe what might be a physical limitation to become something else. The Christian response to both of these individuals, you guys, is never to ridicule. It's never to mock. And both Dolezal and Jenner were mocked from different sectors, right? So the Christian response is never to mock. It's always to dignify. It's always to respect. It's always to love people, right? But the Christian response is also to call attention to the truth, actually out of a sense of love, and say, hey, when all we are is self-defined, when the only definition to what it means to be a human we find within ourselves and our own desires, we've actually detached ourselves more and more from any semblance of reality, and there's just confusion that's going to arise as a result of that. We no longer have any sort of standard or guidelines or measurement, any sort of marker by which we can navigate these complicated questions of gender and of race. We no longer have an anchor point of any kind. We're adrift in an ocean. There's confusion. And it's ironic to me, actually, we shouldn't have blamed Rachel Dolezal if we really believed that something like race is entirely internally self-determined. Why in the world was she lambasted like she was? The Christian response to these might actually be unpopular because it does, in many ways, insist on the idea that our physical selves do matter. That God, when He created us, anchored us to certain physical realities. That can be an unpopular message, and I'm not going to make any bones about that. But it's important for us to remember what it's saying, right? It's a message of love, but it's a message of truth at the same time. It's a message of love because, and this is the second consequence, confusion being the first, but it's a message of love because a world of self-definition is exhausting. Exhaustion is the second consequence. Your generation is bearing the brunt of an anxiety epidemic. Do you guys know this? A study published in the Journal of Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics found that for ages 6 to 17, there has been a 20% increase in diagnoses of anxiety between 2007 and 2012. The rate of depression over that same time period ticked up only slightly, but it did tick up. That means that according to the National Institute of Health, nearly a third of all adolescents aged 13 to 18 will experience an anxiety disorder during their lifetime. When I read those statistics, first of all, I'm just crushed, right? I'm just crushed. Anxiety's horrible. Many of us in this room have experienced it. But the thing I want to ask is why? Why? Do you guys know, if you look at I was a history major in college, and if you look at a broad sweep of history, we live at a time which is by far and away, not even close, the safest time to be a human being on this planet. We're closer to eliminating every single major disease that for centuries have threatened human beings. We're closer to eradicating global poverty and global hunger than we've ever been in the history of the human race. And there are actually, although it's tough to see this because the wars that are raging are terrible, war is terrible, but if you look on a statistical level, this is actually one of the least violent eras in human history as well, at least since World War II, right? Our standard of living has just increased drastically, right? So why this anxiety when we're living in what apparently would be the promised land? If you grabbed one of our founding fathers like John Adams, hey, John, come with me to the future, and he just saw the way that we live, can you just imagine that? I just read a biography of John Adams, so I'm a little on this John Adams kick, right? It would blow his mind. He would look at this, and that would just be the first thing. It would just blow his mind. He just would have no category for it. And yet we're anxious. We're riddled by anxiety. My theory is this: it has everything to do with self-definition. What do you do? There's a term in physics for when you detach yourself from every firm foundation, and it's called falling. Yeah, physics. I graduated high school in 2012, and in 2012, YOLO made its big debut. Right? The kids still saying YOLO these days. That's a big no on the YOLO. Look, YOLO, you only live once. It sounds so fun and free. YOLO, let's go camping, let's get out there, right? But actually I found, and my peers found, that YOLO is a crushing burden. It's not like, we only live once, let's go. It's like, I only live once. Oh my gosh, okay, I have to do everything perfect. And it's a cruel joke because in a self-defined world, if the answers lie within you, and all you have to do to be happy is to realize your dreams that are within you, when you're miserable, how do you process that answer? I must not be YOLOing hard enough. Am I wrong, young people? Am I wrong? Or do you sense the same thing? Do you feel that same thing, that same pressure? You just got to live your dreams a little harder. So as a result, this generation is overwhelmingly insecure and nervous. If you have no firm place to rest your feet, you have to rely on only what society tells you is acceptable. It's like that old phrase, if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for everything. If all you stand for is your inner desires, you're going to end up standing for nothing but the approval of your peers. Because at the end of the day, in the absence of better convictions, all we want is to be accepted. And I'm going to shoot straight with you guys. No amount of affirmation can ever fill that hole in your heart. Even if every single person around you were to be kind and loving and nothing but accepting towards you. You will always, always, always feel the need for more, more, more. And so anxiety continues. The third consequence of a world of self-definition is dehumanization. Dehumanization. We actually end up losing what it means to even be a human in some pretty bizarre ways. A naturalistic world is a worldview. It's a worldview that refers to a world where the only stuff is what's naturally here, just the physical. There's no spiritual, there's no God, there's no good, there's no evil, there's no morality, there's no ultimate purpose, there's no beauty, right? It's just the physical, just the stuff you're made out of. Right? All of us in this room are some pretty fancy meat computers, essentially, in a naturalistic worldview. What's crazy is that when we follow that logic and we keep following it and we keep following it, it leads to some incredible conclusions. Neuroscientist Francis Crick wrote a book called The Astonishing Hypothesis, The Scientific Search for the Soul. He writes this: the astonishing hypothesis is that your joys and your sorrows, your memories and your ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. This hypothesis is so alien to the ideas of most people today that it can truly be called astonishing. That is astonishing. So let me ask you guys something. Are you only what you're made of? Are you only the stuff that you're made out of? It's an interesting question. I contend that if there's no God, then yes, you are. And if there's no God, you're not a person. This has some really troubling implications for ethics. In our Declaration of Independence, which, our America's founders, I have a deep respect for. They weren't by no means perfect people, but they did get one thing very right when they wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." The founders of our system of political ethics realized that we have intrinsic rights that are given to us by our Creator, and no human being has the right to take those away from us. But it's only because we're endowed with them by our Creator. If you take away the Creator, the idea of rights disappears right along with it. If we're just the stuff we're made of, then you and I are just different cogs in the universal mousetrap, right? You're the cheese and I'm the steel bar or whatever. We're all just part of one big physical sort of enmeshed reality, and we're actually indistinguishable from our environment or each other, truly. And when the cogs in a mousetrap start to break down, or the cogs in a clock start to break, what do you do with them? You replace them. We have a bloody 20th century filled with eugenics, forced sterilization, and Holocaust that attest to the power of those ideas when they're taken seriously. Confusion, exhaustion, dehumanization. George MacDonald said, "He who is made in the image of God must know him or be desolate." And we're looking at a desolate world. We're looking at a world that doesn't know its Creator, and it is desolate. I want to just tell you guys a story that's pretty personal to me. It's a story that's shared by a lot of young men and women in the world. It goes along with the theme that we're talking about of sexuality, right? I've participated in that dehumanization of human beings. At age 14, I discovered pornography for the first time. It's a common story, right? But when it's you, it does change things. That was a weighty moment. I felt like I'd crossed a bridge. It wasn't a good one. I gave in to a lie of the enemy. I knew exactly what I was doing. Like Joe, who just spoke, right? I was raised in a Christian home. My parents loved the Lord. They didn't just talk it, they walk it. Right? My dad, righteous man of integrity, taught me what it meant to be a man, taught me what it meant to respect people, right? Taught me the dangers specifically of pornography. I knew about the statistics, I knew what pornography was, but the enemy came to me and he whispered, "Did God really say?" Come on. Did God really say? And I took the bait. And for the rest of my teenage years, I wrestled, I struggled. I got kicked around, man. The enemy loves it when we mess up and we're at our lowest, and he loves to accuse us. Scripture calls him the accuser. You idiot. Gosh, look at you. Shiny on the outside. You're rotten to the core. But it's a trick, because then he also says, "Hey, you're down there. Why not just do it again?" And then you do it again, and he goes, "You idiot, you scum. Look at you, you hypocrite." It's a cycle. I was in that cycle for years. Couldn't break it. I really tried, guys. I really tried. And it wasn't just that because in that sense, I actually dehumanized myself. But the thing about pornography, as we've been talking about, is that it dehumanizes other people. I mean, this is an evil, and it's a hidden evil, and I think it's hidden because so many of us are complicit in it. If you look at the statistics around pornography and human trafficking, you can't unsee it. after basically all of high school and the last years of middle school and all of high school of just losing that battle, I reached just the grossest, lowest point ever. Some of you have been there. You know what I'm talking about. But it was at that point, you guys, it was at that point that I remembered everything I'd been told. And I actually heard a call from the Lord through the voice of Scripture. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising its shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. And have you forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons? My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him, for the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastises every son whom he receives. It is for the discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? We all had earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? Whew. Man, my heart's beating now. My heart was beating then, guys. When that verse came to me, I was like, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. And the Lord just whispered, and he said, you know what, Kasey, consider him who endured such opposition that you won't grow weary and lose heart. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. And it's because I love you that I'm telling you this. So are you ready to shake off this sin? Are you ready to live for me? Are you ready to let me in and have that gross little corner of your heart that you love so much? And he gave me actually, and not everyone has this, okay? God speaks to each of us personally, but he gave me a silver bullet, at least temporarily, to get me out of this cycle, and that was my dad. My dad, righteous man of God. I felt the Lord was like, talk to your dad. Tell him. He'll hold you to it. Oh my gosh. I've never been more scared in my entire life. We're on a camping trip. Hiking up this mountain. Me and Dad, we're sitting by a river. Holy Spirit's like, talk to him. Tell him now. He loves you. Tell him now. And I did, you guys. I just said, Dad, we got to talk. Man, he just listened. And not everybody has that. So don't hear me say that. If you don't have a dad that's like that or in that category, it's okay. But for me, man, he was mirroring what he looks like. Because at the end of my just big confession, my dad just looks at me and he's like, gosh, son, I love you. Let's get you cleaned up. Let's hold you to this. Guys, the world is genuinely broken. We're confused. All of us. All of us are confused. All of us are exhausted. All of us are dehumanized, and in turn, we dehumanize other people. Let me tell you another story. In the beginning, the Word was in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. He came to that which is own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. Children of God, right? My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, because he disciplines the people he loves. If you have Jesus, you're a child of God, and when he disciplines you, it's in love. When those limitations are placed on what we think is our freedom to self-define, it's actually in love. That is a reality, you guys, that changes everything. It changes everything. Instead of confusion, there's clarity. God made humanity, and he decides who we are. You guys know that God spoke creation into existence, but when he made you, he knelt down into the dirt and he made you with his hands. He knit you together in your mother's womb. Your physical body matters to God, which is crazy because it sounds like naturalism has a monopoly on the physical. It doesn't. God created the physical. This is our Father's world, right? So your physical body matters. That is so important. I wish I could just impart to you just how important that is in this world of confusion where we wonder, what are our bodies? Can we do what we want? Is there an inner me that I need to find, right, and pursue? Your body matters, right? And look, God is not ignorant. He knows what's going on. He knows the way we're uncomfortable. All of us. Sometimes we look in the mirror and we're like, I don't like that. I don't like what I see. All of us. You know, I love Sam Albury's testimony, and I love how much he hammered that point. We are all in this boat, because we are. All of us are going to feel unwanted sexual desires. All of us. It's what it means to be human in a fallen world, right? But instead of confusion, there's clarity. We have a path forward. We're not out here defining ourselves. And instead of exhaustion, there is rest. To be a child of God, to know that God's not going to let you turn out horrible. He's actually going to discipline you when you need it. He's going to bring those people in your life. He's going to give you those nudges, and all we have to do is just take them. All we have to do is take them. You're not responsible to just think really hard about who you need to be 30 years down the road and just strive and strive. Actually, you're with a loving Father who's walking there with you. I'm 12 years older than my youngest sister, and so I remember when she was just a baby, okay? And when she was learning how to walk, and she would get up on those little stubby sausage legs, and she'd be like, eh. And then she'd just eat it, you know, epic fail at walking. What we didn't do is stand around and go, you idiot. Gosh, it's pathetic. You can't even walk, right? No, we were overjoyed. We were like, you're doing it. Come on, you're doing it, right? Guys, when God looks at you, you're going to fall down. He's not weirded out. He's not surprised. He's not disgusted. You're going to fall down. You're a little child. So instead of exhaustion, there's rest. Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am humble and gentle in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Are you dealing with anxiety tonight? What if all the pressure was just dropped? I know anxiety is complicated, okay? I'm not trying to say like, just believe the right thing and boom, no more anxiety. But when you feel it, what if you knew you had a Father who's got you, whether you feel perfect right in that moment or not? He's got you. And finally, instead of dehumanization, there's restoration. Look, guys, the world is telling you to define yourself, define yourself, define yourself, define yourself, but we can't. Man, like, you didn't even give yourself your own name. You didn't decide to be called what your name is. Some of us might have, right? That's, I guess, a legal option. But for the vast majority of us, you didn't decide what weird blob of syllables people were going to call you for the rest of your life. But there's nothing more beautiful than the sound of your own name. You were defined by other people. Other people shaped you. Other people molded you. Other people gave you opportunities. Other people walked with you. And most of all, we are defined by God. To have a name is to be known. To have a name is to be seen. To have a name is to be accepted. George MacDonald says, who can give a man this, his own name? God alone. For no one but God sees what a man is. Jesus knows your name right now. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him, and he with me. So instead of dehumanization, there's restoration. And I'm going to end on this point. Guys, in Christ, we're just forgiven. God throws our sin. He takes it and he throws it as far as the east is from the west. but he also offers us the chance to walk in truth with him. He offers us these little moments sometimes where he says, let go of this. Let go of this. I know you like it. I know you think you want it. Let go of it. Let me have it. And he just takes it out of our hands. Right? Today, we've done a lot of talk about sexual brokenness and the ways that we all stumble. And actually, it's going to sound weird. My hope is actually that the Holy Spirit's doing something in your heart right now. When God gave me that nudge to talk to my dad, to run with perseverance, to just let him in and let the truth change my heart, that changed my life forever when I said yes to that. It was, to this day, the most terrifying thing I've ever done. Guaranteed. But it led to freedom. God used my relationships, my community, the Christians around me to break shackles of addiction off. And he started by saying, you're my child, I love you. I love you whether or not you break these shackles off. But because I love you, I want them off, right? And I am a God of love, and I'm not going to rest until you're free of this. Guys, is there stuff you need to be free of?